Welcome to the online lecture that covers
molecular interactions
and properties of liquid and solids.
Alright, so before we begin, I want you to think of your most favorite food or beverage to eat or drink and how delicious it tastes when it hits your tongue and goes in your mouth and you're Alright, so now that I've got you hungry, let's talk about interactions between molecules. So taste originates from interactions between molecules. Those molecules in the food are basically interacting with receptors on your tongue. All right, and so we have specialized cells on our tongue, taste buds, or papillae, as they're called scientifically, and they are going to be responsible for interacting with our food particles. And they're going to send signals to our brain to tell us what that food tastes like. So here's a picture right here, kind of a up close microscopic view of different taste buds. And down here in this picture, we have kind of where on our tongue we can taste certain types of tastes, I guess we can say. So in the back of our tongue is where the bitter taste is usually found. And then on the sides of our tongue, we've got sour versus salty. And in the front little tip is where we have most of the taste buds that are going to interact with sweet molecules be. And so these are very specific in recognizing certain types of molecules and shapes of molecules in our food and sending signals to our brain. All right, so these interactions between molecules and the taste receptors are going to be caused by what we call intermolecular forces, attractive forces that exist between molecules. And we can see here these are two molecules that are they have basically interactions between them. So they're going to be for example, like attracted to each other in somehow. So they're not going to be actually bonding with each other. They're not going to form bonds to stick together, but they're going to be attracted between the molecules, usually with electrostatic forces. All right, so these intermolecular forces exist between all molecules and atoms, and they are basically responsible for the existence of solids and liquids. If it wasn't for intermolecular forces, then everything would be a gas. All right, and so different states of matter are going to depend on the magnitude of intermolecular forces relative to the amount of energy in the substance. Okay, and so basically how we can think about this is that in gases, okay, they remember from the kinetic molecular theory that said that these gas molecules are not going to interact with each other. So they are not going to have any intermolecular forces between each other. They will not be attracted to each other or stick or be close to each other at all. They are just moving in straight lines, colliding with each other with no actual interactions. So gases have zero intermolecular forces. When we move to liquids, okay, they do have intermolecular forces. Okay, and so their intermolecular forces are going to be stronger than basically the energy, the thermal energy that those atoms or molecules have. So they'll be able to kind of stick closer together to each other. And then the strongest is going to be the solids, which basically are not going to they're going to have very little energy and higher intermolecular forces, so they'll be able to stick together in a nice solid shape. Over here is a picture of the intermolecular forces between water molecules. So we can see these dashed lines here are intermolecular forces between water molecules. If we remember that hydrogens have a slightly positive charge and oxygens have a slightly negative charge because water is a polar substance, and so the slightly positive hydrogens will attract the slightly negative oxygen of a different water molecule. So again, intermolecular forces are between molecules, not within molecules. They are not bonds. All right, so let's talk about those properties of liquids and solids. Molecules or atoms that compose liquids and solids are in close contact with one another, especially compared to gases. Remember, gases are going to, the space between the gas molecules are going to be much bigger than the actual gas molecules themselves. So those gas molecules are not going to be very much, close to each other at all. Now, the difference between liquids and solids is going to come from the freedom of movement of those molecules. So the molecules are close together, but in liquids, they're able to freely move around each other. Okay, but in solids, those atoms or molecules are fixed in their position and they're only allowed to actually vibrate. So that's basically going to make the big difference between liquids and gases. Liquid molecules are still able to move around each other even though they're close together and have strong intermolecular forces, whereas solids are not able to move around. They are fixed in their positions and can only vibrate. So if we take a look specifically at liquids, these are the properties of liquids. They have high densities compared to gases. And again, because the molecules and atoms are a lot closer together. So they're going to have a lot more mass per unit volume. Liquids also have indefinite shape. That means they assume the shape of their container. And this is because although the atoms or molecules in a liquid are close together, they're still, remember, freely able to move around each other. So they're still free to flow. So they can take up the shape of their container. However, liquids do have definite volume. They are not easily compressed, in other words. Remember, when we talked about gases, we can compress gases because the gas molecules are very far apart from each other. So there's a lot of space in between gas molecules. Okay, and you can see that here in this picture. So there's lots of spaces in between those gas molecules. So that means we can compress gases and bring those gas molecules closer together. That is not the case at all with liquids. Okay, so these molecules are very much close together, and so they can't be compressed anymore. Now, in comparison to solids, again, just like liquids, have higher densities, obviously, than gases. And again, that's because those atoms or molecules are closer together. And just kind of a little side note that the densities of solids are usually just slightly greater than liquids. So it's not a huge not going to be a huge difference in density between liquids and solids of a particular substance. However, there is going to be a huge density difference between gases and the liquids and solids. Gases will be definitely a lot less dense than the liquid and solid of that particular substance. Now, the exception, though, is water. Water, when it becomes solid, becomes less dense than the liquid. Most of the time, other substances will become more dense as solids than they are liquids. Now, solids, unlike liquids, will have a definite shape, and that's because those molecules and atoms are fixed in place. So they can't move around, so it's whatever shape it is the shape it is. They're not able to actually take up or assume the shape of their container. Likewise, they also have definite volume. Just like liquids, they are not easily compressed, and for the same reason, those molecules and atoms are close in contact and cannot be compressed any further. Okay, so we can see that even here in the picture. They're very close together, and so there's not much space in between them, so we cannot squeeze those atoms or molecules any closer together. And the last part of the properties of solids kind of goes along with the shape. The shape can either be crystalline or amorphous, and a crystalline structure is basically very ordered long-range structure, and versus amorphous, where it's kind of like random. If you look at the molecules, they're not, they're kind of just randomly like chunks here and there, if you want to think about it like that. So a crystalline structure is more like if you think of an ionic crystal, where it's got definite pattern and long-range order or shape to it. All right, so those are the properties of liquids and solids, and during next class we'll take a look a little bit more about these properties of liquids and solids and how it relates to surface tension and viscosity. But for now, that is all.